Holy landscapes. Today we're thinking about fields. A field from my childhood memory that brings me scars is when we were on a family holiday and we would go on walks, sometimes by the cliffs, but always in big fields, at least in my memory. And I remember on a hot sunny day, my dad picking up a cowpat that was dry like a frisbee and frisbeeing it at my back or my sister's back. And we would run in fear because when those cowpats hit you, there is still a soft, moist centre to them. So when the dry bit exploded on your back, you would have this that would go on your back as well. I could remember my dad now laughing as he would hurl these things at us, and my mum going, Hodger, stop it, leave them alone, and Amanda and I running for our lives. Another field that was a completely different experience for me was one here in Tonbridge at the south end of the town. I fancied this girl called Jo Hills. She was 17, I was 24, and I thought I want to go on a date with her, but I need somewhere perfect. So I looked, the weather was good, so I made a picnic and we went to a private school, bunked over the fence and went into the field. And I remember being in that field as we had that picnic thinking, she'll probably dump me in about 5 weeks' time, but I'll be back at Bible college by then, so it'll be fine. But I don't think I'll ever finish it with her. About 18 months later, Jo can give you the exact dates and I'm probably in trouble for not remembering them. We went back to that field, I picked her up after school and she said I was so serious that she thought I was going to finish it with her. And we went to that field and I had the ring in my pocket to propose. And as I bent down on one knee under the tree where we'd had the picnic, Jo said to me, Neil, if this is an important question, we actually had our first picnic under that tree over there. So I got back up, wet knee, and we walked over to the other tree. I got down on one knee again and said, Jo, will you marry me? And she said yes, didn't even think about it. Well, no, she thought about it, but she didn't have to think about it, if you get what I mean. It was a fantastic field, filled with fantastic memories. One of the first fields in the Bible is written about in Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 to 16. Adam made love to his wife Eve and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord I have brought forth a man. Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favour on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favour. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. But the Lord said to him, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Lord put a mark on Cain, so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So Cain becomes a restless wanderer. Cain, the sound of the word in Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament is written in, Cain sounds like to get. And Abel is similar, almost identical in Hebrew to the word vanity or the words mere breath. To get, vanity, mere breath. I mean, they're not good sounding names, are they, for brothers to begin with? Eve was kind of talked into her sin, wasn't she, a few chapters earlier in Genesis by the servant. But Cain can't even be talked out of his. When God comes to him, he denies it. He says he didn't do anything. He won't confess it, he won't accept it, and he will not accept his punishment either. His reaction to his punishment is interesting. You can read it one of two ways in the Hebrew. You can read it the way it was in our reading, my punishment is more than I can bear, as in, it's not fair, why are you doing this to me? Or you can read the Hebrew as, my crime is too great to forgive. God, I've really screwed up, there's no way you can forgive me. Either way we go with it, Cain ends up in the land of Nod, east of Eden, or in front of Eden. Nod literally means to move to or fro, wandering. It's the wandering, the actual geographical wandering that is difficult for him. We don't know exactly where he was, it's unclear. But Cain bemoans the fact that he is a restless wanderer. An old way of saying it would be he's a vagabond. It feels as if he's outside of God's presence. Now we know that he's not outside of God's presence because no one is. But it feels like that. And maybe it's felt like that for you and for me. Maybe even now you feel like a restless wanderer.
Derek Kinder wrote, God's concern for the innocent is matched only by his care for the sinner. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said, how wonderful it would be if one could only be worthy of hearing the song of the grass. Each blade of grass sings out to God without any ulterior motive and without expecting a reward.
No ulterior motive, without expecting any reward. That's what the rabbi said about the blades of grass. That is the complete opposite to the story of Cain and Abel in their field. In their field, Cain wants to get it, the reward, the witness of God. Abel, it's vanity. He wants God's attention as well. They are like squabbling kids. I don't understand why God likes one offering and not the other. That isn't told to us in the story, and I think we'd be foolish to try and work out some neat formula as to why that happened. But what I do find is that the first murder in the Bible takes place in the context of worship. Both bring in offerings to God, and one of them ends up getting killed because the other is jealous. Worship should never be vain, glory, vanity seeking. It should never be get it, grab it from God. But if I'm honest, how often can worship of God, and I'm thinking here of sung worship in a church building or auditorium, how often can it slip from genuine heartfelt worship to God to performance which is about vanity, or about God, look how well I sang, surely you're going to do me a favour. It may not end in murder for us physically, but you know, sometimes if we're not careful, something can die in our hearts. It's not a good field to be in when it comes to worshipping God. We want to be more in a Psalm 23 field, don't we, when it comes to worshipping, being with God. He lays me down in green pastures, says King David. It's such a wonderful picture of how God looks after us. That's what our worship and our lives should be like. That religious experience, if you like, with God should be one, at least most of the time, where we're laid down in green pastures for his name's sake, for his glory. It's not about me and what I get out of it and how God gives me attention. It's about what God does for me and how I respond in living a life of beauty for him. The Old Testament word, the Hebrew word for salvation, literally means to be brought into a spacious environment amidst trouble. I'll say that again in case you didn't catch it. To be brought into a spacious environment amidst trouble. That's what it means to be saved by Jesus. That's the kind of green pasture, the kind of field we're called to live our lives in. It's not about rules and regulations and which offerings right and which offerings wrong. It's about living in a spacious environment with God. But let's not forget that that's amidst trouble. There will be difficult times. There will be challenges we face. But it's always in that spacious environment of freedom, of love, of creativity with our heavenly Creator. When we lived in Sevenoaks at my last church, our first house backed onto a farmer's field, and I used to love going out there, and you could walk over field and field and field until you were lost in the middle of nowhere. I did notice one harvest time that when he came round to harvest in his tractor or combine harvester or Fiat Punto or whatever he drove, that he was a good 5 metres from the edge of the field to where he harvested. Because of the trees that were overhanging, he couldn't quite get in there. And so I thought, next year I'm going to dig a bit of his land and plant some vegetables in it outside of our fence. And if he digs it up and gets annoyed with me, well then I've not lost anything, but I'll see. So I planted out some swede and some French beans, just a few things. And I was really nervous because I could see his combine harvester Fiat Punto thingy coming round the edge of the field, and I thought, what's going to happen? And I stood by my windows just to check. And this might be my artistic memory, or it might be true, I'm not sure, but I do remember him driving past and ignoring it. But in my memory, I imagine him looking over and thinking, well done, son, you've done all right there. In the Bible, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we're told that the Jewish people should leave the edges of their field, that they should leave them when they are doing their harvesting. Why? So that the foreigner, the orphan and the widow could pick the crops from the edges. Always leave something for those who are less well off, less fortunate than you. Why did God tell them to do that and live in community like that? It says quite clearly, guys, you were slaves in Egypt. You know as a people what oppression is like. You know what it's like to have no field from which to pick your crops. So leave the edges of yours for the foreigner, for the widow and for the orphan, so that they can have food to eat. So in that blood-drenched field where Cain kills his brother, when God challenges him, Cain's response is, am I my brother's keeper? And God's response throughout Scripture is, yeah, bet your life you are. You are your brothers and your sisters and your neighbours and your enemies' keeper. You are meant to look after them. That's why you leave the edges of the field. I think this goes some way to defining, to guiding, to showing which kind of field we're going to live in life. If I am selfish and self-centred, get it like Cain, vanity like Abel, then I'm probably going to spend a good chunk of my life living in blood-soaked, blood-stained fields. If I say, actually, I am my brother's keeper, my sister's keeper, I have a responsibility to those who find it harder than me in some parts of life, just as others have a responsibility to me where I find it hard in my life. And so as a whole community of the world, we are one another's keepers and looking after one another and looking out for one another. If I live that kind of life, I'm probably going to be in a Psalm 23 green pasture, a spacious environment in the midst of trouble, salvation. I think that's a good place to be. Not a blood-drenched field, but a green pasture. And looking out for my brother or sister will help me experience that in my life. So which field do we want to live in? The choice, as it said on one game show years ago, is ours. I don't know about you, but I want to make the daily decision to not be in the restless wandering field of Cain, but instead to be in the green pasture field of God.